ahead and get started. So this is the forage/hay testing station. Anybody have any idea what forage or hay testing is? No ideas at all? All right, so what we do, especially here at the research centers, we test different forages and grasses for their nutritional content. So we know what kind of nutrition we're actually giving to our animals. So a lot of our livestock graze off of pastures and hay. They rely on that heavily for their nutrition. But not all grasses and not all hay is created equal. Some have different levels of nutrition in them. So to be able to make sure we're giving proper or adequate levels of nutrition to our animals, we need to know what kind of nutrition is actually in those grasses and forages and hay. So to do that, we take a sample of our grass or hay and we submit it to, for instance here at the research center, we send it here to our lab and we'll actually test it to see what kind of nutrition is in there. And then we can decide how much grass the animals need, or if we need to add some additional supplements or feed stuff. I just came from the feed stuff section, right? So if we need to add any more nutrition to complement our grass, we might add it in feedstuffs. But to be able to take a good sample of our forages, we have to have the right tools and stuff. So today we got 2 hay bales in the back there. We have a big round bale and we have a smaller square bale. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a semicircle around both of the bales, and I want you to tell me which one you think has the better nutrition, okay? So let's go ahead and make a semicircle around the bales real quick. So we have our big square bale, and we have our smaller, big round bale, and our smaller square bale. Now, who thinks that the smaller bale has better nutrition inside it? Hands up and answer. Why is that? What would you think that this one has better nutrition?
It's dry out.
One looks drier than the other? Okay. How many people think that the big round bale has higher nutrition? Everybody who didn't have their hand up should have their hand up, right? All right, so why do we think that maybe the big round bale has better nutrition? Just a guess? Yeah, exactly. We can't really tell nutrition visually. It's hard. We can't see what the actual chemical composition is inside these grasses. We can't tell. So we have to take a sample. And so to take a sample of our hay bales, we have to have special equipment. So sometimes we're lucky we have something like this, which is a drill that's hooked to a tube with really sharp teeth on it. And these really sharp teeth help take a sample from inside of the bale. And then if we're not lucky, we don't have the drill to use, we have to use something like this one. It's pretty much the same principle except for you get to be the drill. You have to push it and twist, push, twist, and push and twist, and then you'll collect your sample inside the tube this way. When it comes to collecting for the hay bales, we have to make sure we sample the right way. So whenever hay is made, it's usually all the dried up grass is laid up inside of a row. Oh, you want to come over here? Sure.
Yeah, I'm gonna come over here.
So whenever we bale our hay, it's our dried up grass is put together and laid into a row like this. And so our round baler, when it comes along, it takes that grass and it rolls it up. And it rolls it up, and it rolls it up, and it rolls it up nice and tight. So you can see that as it rolls it up, the grass gets layered on top of each other, and on top of each other, and on top of each other. So whenever we go to sample a round bale, if we were to sample it from the flat side, we might only sample a little bit of the grass that's in there. And we don't want that. We want to make sure we take a big sample. We want to take as little bit from a bunch of different spots of grass as possible. So to do that, we're going to sample from the round side. Because it's been rolled up, we'll sample through one layer, and then 2 layer, and then layer, and layer, and layer, and layer. We'll get a bunch of little bits of a whole bunch of grass at one time. And the same principle applies for our square bale. Whenever it gets baled, the baler kind of punches it together by layer, by layer, by layer. So it's kind of like if we were to fold our paper up in this case. And so instead of sampling from the top or the long side, we want to sample from the short side of the bale. That way we get a layer and a layer and a layer of grass to better represent our tables. So I need 4 volunteers real quick. We got 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so I need 2 over here, and I need 2 right here, okay? We're going to actually practice sampling our forage, and we're going to show you what all we do with it. So, Jaime's going to show y'all, you two, how to work with our handle, and you two, we're going to practice using our drill piece, okay? All right, so
You want to explain both how you work?
yeah, yeah. Okay, so again, with our drill, we're going to move this first. Who wants to go first? I'll be here, don't worry. So are we sampling the right side? Is this side of sample?
Exactly the same.
You don't remember? So remember when we roll it in, we want to sample from the round side, not the flat side. So yes, this is the right side. You want to sample here. So what we're going to do is you're going to take it, you're going to put it just anywhere you want pretty well. Try to avoid the strings. You're going to pull the trigger and we're just going to push the drill. Okay? Make sure it works first. Pull it out. Don't touch this. So just push on the drill. And when you're done, I'll take it from you and we'll collect our sample. Take our sample out.
Oh, that's nice. And now you need to keep the dish from here. Just to put all the samples in it.
JK, did you mention how many pours they might want to do when they're submitting a sample?
Yes, yeah, when we get done with this part, I'll
Ah.
explain that.
Okay, sorry.
No worries. I said it earlier yesterday, last group. This one I'm going to wait.
Okay.
All right, so you ready to try? All right, so when we go right there, we're just going to pull the trigger and push the trigger. And then pull it back out. Okay. Perfect. So we're going to put it back to the safe spot. That way we can't push it. We're going to undo this. Now, sometimes the grass will get stuck inside of our tube. So to fix that, we got a stick that will help us, because I can't get it out of there. So I'll take my stick. Sometimes I'll knock it down to get it down some. Take my stick and I'll push it on out. So when we push it on out, we can see all of our sample that we just took. So we can see that it's nice and ground up, nice and fine. That's good. That means that's a good sample. So we got one done. We'll put it into our bag. Now, if we're sampling, we don't want to just, so if we just sample this bale, we know really good what kind of, we take that and put it to the lab, we would have a good idea what kind of nutrition is in just this bale. But if you're collecting a lot of hay, if you baled a lot of hay, say 50 bales, you want to sample more than just that one bale, right? Because you want to know what's the nutrition in all of your bales. But we don't want to sample every single bale because that would take a lot. So usually we do about 10 bales or so. To give you an example, and you take all of those samples from those 10 bales, put them together, and that's what you're going to send to the lab. So let's get one more. All right. So we just don't push here, just pull the trigger and push. Pull it back out. There you go. Perfect. Put it on to the safe spot so you can't press it. And dump it out. Again, it's not wanting to come out. So we got our stick. And we want to be real careful. So sometimes the sticks, you have your stick? Yes. So some of the times the sticks, the good ones, like the one that Jaime's showing, has a piece of rubber on the end of it, because if I was to start to get the grass real tight, if I was to push real hard, and then I let go, and then it pushes down, again, these teeth are really sharp on this blade, so you have to be real careful, so I can really cut myself and get hurt. So sometimes we have rubbers on the end of it like this, that way it stops it from going all the way, that way you can't hurt yourself. All right? So we got our next sample, we combined with our other one. Now we got them both together, put them up. Now this is what we're going to send to the station to get tested. So let's go back, take a seat, let's talk about what we're going to do with it next, okay? So once we got our hay cut, our sample together in the bag, this is what we can send to the lab for our hay sample. Now if we were to sample other grasses or forages, and something out in the pasture, instead of using the collecting tools like these, that wouldn't really work out in the pasture. Instead what we would do is we would take hand samples. We would just go along and we would rip up whatever we thought maybe our livestock were eating. Or if you take a pair of scissors and cut as well. But usually you take your hands, because whatever you can rip up, It's a good idea. It kind of represents whatever a cow can rip up with her tongue. So we go along, take hand samples, put them in a bag like this, and send it to the lab. What's the big difference between the grass out in our pastures and the grass that we have here in our hay bale?
The hay's dry.
The hay's a lot drier, exactly. So whenever we go to test, we want to only test the nutrition that's in the grass. We don't want to test whatever water's in there because it's just water. It's kind of just a waste at this point. So we don't want to test for that. So we got to get it out of our grass. So how do we get water out of our grass possibly? Heat it up, exactly. So same way that we do with our hay. How do we get the water out of our hay? We cut the grass, we let it sit in the field, get it nice and hot, and the sun will dry it out. But if we're sending in samples from our pasture, we got to find another way to try to dry it out. So to do so, we have big dryers right behind me. We'll go take a look at it in a second. We have dryers here that will take our grass samples and we'll put it in there and it'll dry it out because it will heat it up and we'll get it nice and dry. Then once it's nice and dry, we'll take it to the grinding room, which we won't go take a look there. But the grinding room, we have big machines that spin real fast and they grind up the grass. So it takes even this little hay that we have here, our sample, see how those look pretty small pieces. But the grinder makes it even smaller and puts it into pieces this size that we have here in this bag. And come up here and take a look at it in a second. So let's go take a look at our dryer. We'll go. Jaime's going to be there for us. He's going to take a look. You can go inside there and feel how dry it is. And we're going to make the loop and come right back to your seats. Okay? So if you want to come, you can. If you don't want to, just stay right here. Let's go take a look at the dryer real quick.
Come inside to feel how it is inside. You want to go inside if you want. Because inside you can see all the samples that we can go on if you want as well. We have all the samples in paper bags, and actually they are drying at the moment. You want to go over now? That's hot. That is the idea. So how temperature do you think is in there? How much temperature do you think is in there? A lot, right? A lot, right? It's 55 Fahrenheit. But that is the idea.
55?
Yes.
Centigrade?
No, it's Fahrenheit.
Wait,
That
I know.
seems-
Sorry,
Celsius.
Okay, yeah. So
Sorry.
what is that in Fahrenheit?
That's a very good question.
Roughly.
140.
It's what?
140.
140?
Oh, thank you.
Wow.
You want to go inside? Someone else? You want to go?
Yeah, so it's
You're
pretty
fine.
warm. Anybody else want to walk inside?
So once you get done, you can either walk back or you can walk back this way so everybody can kind of make the loop. So those who want to feel can get inside, okay? Go on around, go back to your seats.
I use a microwave.
Some kind of, yeah, like a big oven.
I just closed the door one time down.
All right, so again, once we got you saw how dry it is in there. That helps us dry out the grasses that we might get, the fresh grasses, get that moisture out of there. So we can actually, when we run our sample, we're actually making sure we're testing for just the nutrients there, not any water. So again, once we get our sample nice and dry, run it through the grinder, get it nice and small, and now we're ready to test it and see what kind of nutrition it has in it. So the way that we test it to see what kind of nutrition it has, again, most of the time we're testing this for cattle or horses. And so the best way to test to see what kind of nutrition for our cattle, how much nutrition is in here for cattle, is to actually put it through a cow and test it. But that can take a long time. So instead of actually putting it through a cow, we collect the same material from inside the cow. So how many of you are familiar with the rumen of cattle? So the rumen's that big fermentation vat. It's about the size of a bathtub. That's where all the forage sits inside the cow. That's where it all gets digested and fermented. Well, to try to simulate that, sometimes we can add different chemicals and mix them together to kind of make a fake cow stomach. But instead, what we do here is we actually have a steer. His name is Fluffy, that we actually collect from. He has a port or a cannula on his rumen that we can actually go inside of his stomach and collect samples. So once a week, either Hiran or Jaime will go in there and they will take samples. They'll take cheesecloth and they'll collect from inside the cow's stomach and they'll squeeze it and they'll get all the juices and they'll get all that rumen fluid out and we'll bring it back to the lab, and we'll put it in a jar like this. So once we put it in a jar like this, we'll take our samples, and we'll put them into an even smaller bag than this, and we'll take those bags and put them inside here. So we have in here our sample, and we have cow stomach juice, and we put it on a machine that just turns it back and forth for several hours. How long?
2 days.
2 days? Okay. So for 2 days, it'll sit in here. You can see we have the little paddle in there, so that way it's constantly getting turned and mixed up, just like an actual cow stomach. So it gets turned around and churned up for 2 whole days inside of there, and then we'll take it out and we'll put it through our machine that tests and analyzes for the nutrients inside of that forage. And that way we know whatever was digested, we can tell whatever was digested and whatever nutrients weren't digested. So that way we know what is actually being absorbed by that cow, by that horse, to be able to help give them that nutrition they need. And we'll take those results and we'll send an email back to the producer, whoever gave us the grass, and we'll let them know. That way they can make the decisions to maybe, again, add some more feed stuff, or maybe give them some more pasture, whatever the choices, whatever they might need to do for that, okay? So does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, picture of this too, like,
There's a video on our website on YouTube, and it actually shows the collection process. So it shows them opening the port and pulling out the material, and you hear all the sounds, the gurgling and the juices, and it's awesome.
It's not that bad.
Oh no, it's cool, it's cool.
Oh yeah, it's really cool until if the collection animal coughs.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's very funny.
Yeah, it does.
Especially if you're the person right in front collecting. It explodes all over you.
For that awesome stomach juice that you were talking about, is there going to be variability in the acidity, or does it stay constant for most part?
So we feed a strict diet to Fluffy, so that way we're hopefully maintaining a consistent rumen environment inside of Fluffy. That way it is consistent throughout the test. Yeah. All right, so y'all ready to figure out which of our grasses were better? Because these have been sampled already. So let me grab my paper and I'll tell you. All right, well, our results came back and it actually is the big bale that has the better nutrition. So it's not always depending on, it doesn't matter what size the bale is. It's the nutrition inside of the grass that's in the bale. And today, our big bale actually had the better nutrition. So you couldn't really tell that by just looking on the outside, could you? You have to be able to test it and to be able to find out what kind of nutrition is on the inside. Yes, ma'am?
If you were to compare two different samples, would you make sure they were collected on the same day, or so it's not like the sun or water destroying the nutrition values?
That's a good question, yeah. So you as a producer, you do want to make sure your samples are as uniform as possible. So again, for instance, if you're sampling 2 different pastures, or if you're sampling 2 different cuts of hay, you want to sample them at the same time, and you want to have a good randomization of samples. So you don't want to just, so for instance, when we do pasture sampling, you don't want to just go find the best grass in the pasture and take those samples. You want to take a sample from everything, get a good representation. Now, when it comes to moisture, that's why we usually dry out our samples. That way they're all dry. That way those that might have more moisture than the other, whenever we dry them out, they both have pretty well 0 water inside them. That way they're on equal playing field when they get tested. Good question. Yes, ma'am?
What are the types of grass that
These 2 were 2 stargrass bales.
Okay, so they are the same.
So they were the same species, yes. Exactly. They were the same species. They just probably came from a different field. They may have had, I don't know the exact specifications, but to bring those differences in nutrition levels, it could have been that one was cut earlier than the other, one could have been fertilized at a more recent date. There's a lot of different factors. One field pasture may just have better soil. Our soils, of course, are the major impact onto our forage grasses, so one just may have a better soil associated with it in that pasture. There's a lot of different factors that could go into making the same species of grass have different nutrition levels. Other question?
How much of a difference is there between the 2 fields?
So the numbers we have here, so the two numbers that we really look at when we get our forage tested is we look at crude protein, and we look at what's called a TDN, or total digestible nutrients, which is kind of a way of looking at energy or energy inside of that grass. So crude protein tells you how much it's going to be able to help animals grow, and the TDN is going to tell you how much energy they're getting from that grass. So our square bale, it had 1.4% crude protein, or what is it 1.4 or 14 in this case? 1.4 percent crude protein, and our TDN is 47. And then our big bale had 2.0, so it was 0.6 higher, and the TDN was 52, so it was 5.5% higher. So overall, it was better in both crude protein and energy.
Isn't that really low for protein?
But that's
nitrogen. That's nitrogen.
Oh, okay. Well,
So you'd have to do the calculation to find out what the protein is.
yeah, so, okay, sorry, this is nitrogen.
So
Just
1.4 is 8.6 protein.
8.6.
8.6.
Okay.
And the 2 is 12.
Okay, so what is considered a good protein? Like, what would you say, boy, that grass has got good protein? What number would that be?
For our summertime kind of hay bale grasses, anything that's going to be above 11 or 12 is going to be considered pretty good. It's going to be really high.
Actually, for the diet, for the diet of the animals, you need to have more than 7%.
More than 7?
More than 7. 7 is the magic number. If it's more than 7, it's fine. If it's more of that, it's great. But at least 7%.
What breed is it?
I'm sorry. Oh, fluffy? I don't know. What fluffy is?
I have no idea.
I don't know. I've never met Fluffy. I met the steer beforehand, Wally. So you see me have Wally in the jar. That was the steer beforehand. That's the only one that I got to meet.
Do you make dryers for like cold bales or just sample?
We only,
Some people have barns, right?
yeah, so yeah.
Drying barn.
Yeah, so for different commodities, they may have different large drying buildings almost. But for here, we're just doing samplings. So we just do what we have here. So there are some facilities that need to dry bales quickly, or other, maybe not even hay bales. Maybe it's like, for instance, peanuts. They go to harvest peanuts, they hook them up to dryers that are kind of like wagons. But so yeah, there's different commodities, different crops that use bigger buildings. It's not just food. Yes.
So let's say if somebody goes, like a farmer goes and cuts some hay grass and they send it off to you guys to get tested, are you looking at the seed heads, or what exactly are you looking at as far as protein?
Yeah, we're looking at whatever you send us. So whatever we can only test as good a sample as you send us. So if you go by and you collect all seed heads and send that to us, that's what we're going to test. So what we're hoping is to take a little bit of everything from the whole pasture to represent the pasture as a whole. Then when you send it to us, we'll dry it out first and put it into our grinder to get it ground up nice and fine. So that way there'll be little bits of maybe seed head, little bits of stem, little bits of grass, blade, all mixed up together. So that way when we go to test this and put a little bit of everything inside of the sample, we're testing everything as a whole. But again, we can only test what you send us. So that's where the first step is making sure you have a good sample collected from your pasture. Yeah.
Do you measure the amount of stomach juices that go in the jars?
Yep. Yeah. Do you all know how much goes in?
24 samples.
No, how much rumen fluid?
2 liters.
2 liters.
Wow.
2 liters. Yep.
Is Fluffy separated?
Separated? Yep. He's separated from everybody else. Gets his own meal every day. Consistently. Yep.
So for this like spots with the spots and stuff, how does that selection is it always open?
No, it has a rubber plug on the inside of it, so that way it's sealed off. And then we only pull it out, open it up when we need to get in there and collect the rumen juices. The rest of the time it has that plug there, so that way nothing else is getting inside.
Did you put it like in your stomach like on surgery or something?
That's exactly right. Yeah. So we select very few animals to go through that procedure, but it is a surgical procedure. They put the cannula in them, and they will remain a research scientific animal until the end of their days. Stay here at the research center.
The forage management program at ONA provides forage testing results for producers in the state of Florida. Testing your forage is really important for the producers to make good decisions towards the forage management and also livestock feeding. We developed and adapted some procedures that we believe are more accurate to report the testing results for producers for the forages that we have, particularly here in South Florida, such as limpo grass, stargrass, Bermuda grass, and Bahia grass. And if you would like to have your forage tested, please contact your county extension agent. Or you can access our website and get the form, and you can mail us the forage samples and we'll provide you the results.
Any other questions? No? Okay. Well, if you think of any, let me know. But if you're not, I think you have about 2 minutes. So if you wanted to go grab some more water from the from the water station, or if you needed to use the restroom, be real quick because I think you got again about 2 minutes, right?
Yep, 2 minutes before you rotate.
Thank you.
Thank you.